Hello everyone, welcome to the Hue Spotlight. Well, this is the advantage of having 3 different shows on 3 different sets, and sometimes you just don't have the extra body to move the couch. So yes, this is the Hue Living Room couch, but it is Hue Spotlight, and we are talking music. And we have a great sit-down interview, virtually of course, with Robb Nash. He is a Manitoban, a true Winnipegger, and let's just say his brush with death never gets old, and his music has never been more powerful. Here's my interview with Robb Nash. Well, I think I know this familiar face. I don't want to date us, and I mean as in years, Robb, but it has been a while, but I am so happy to see you are still doing it, and your music now is resonating so much more than when we first got together, a little over 10 years ago. Am I correct?
Yeah, and you're not aging, but back then I didn't even have a beard.
I
So,
know.
so it has been a minute.
Well, hey, like you have to change with the times and roll with the punches, and certainly you have. I mean, the backstory, it has been talked about, and you've told it a million times. You're brushed with death, you come back, now speaking out about mental health, and especially now, Robb, going through a pandemic, COVID, isolation. We never thought that we would ever experience anything like this. Coming out of it, still a lot of baggage and a lot of the unknowns, and mental health is now at the forefront. So take it away for you on this new album and your message.
Yeah, and you're right. It's seeing what everybody's gone through in the last, couple of years here has been really tough, and people are now starting to talk about it, but I don't think we're going to know the long-term effects of this for a long time. Um, you know, I, but I understand it, for me, for those who don't know my backstory, I'm 6'5". I played every sport, and when I was 17 years old, you feel indestructible. And me and my friends went for a joyride, and on these icy Manitoba roads, and we were about half a kilometer from our school, and we passed one last car and got hit by a semi truck, and I was found with no pulse, not breathing. Obviously, I was resuscitated by a first responder who happened to be the first person driving by. It was really interesting. I got to sit down and talk with him a few years ago, and
Wow.
meeting the man that saved your life, it was quite incredible. And yeah, and so I don't remember getting into an art accident because, I was hit on the head really hard. They had to rebuild my skull a few times now with titanium. So I woke up, you know, finding out I was in this big car accident. And now I went from a 6'5" dude that played sports to a 6'5" guy getting bathed by his mom. So I went to a very dark place because I didn't know my identity. Like I play sports. My identity wasn't in who I was, it was in what I do. That's how I had
Mm.
friends through sports, and I was popular and stuff. Now who am I? So it brought me to a really dark place. And I grew up in a pretty legalistic religious home, and people would feed me all these cliches and be like, well, people would say, it was fate, this day had your name on it, and some people in my family actually told me that God spanked me with a semi because I'm a bad kid. So now I was angry with God. But the most common thing people would say to me is they would say that everything happens for a reason. And people say that with good intentions. And I've seen that statement do great things for people. But since my accident, I've met with tons of people, funerals, prisons, hospitals. And I think that that statement actually does more damage than good. It did for me. Because now it's like everything happens for a reason. What's the reason I was hit by a semi truck? I got to find this reason. So I'm thinking, is this how life is when you need a life lesson? You have to get struck by lightning, and so it brought me to this really dark place. And for 2 years, I was suicidal. My friends didn't know, my family didn't know. I knew how to keep it all in check, but just like people in the pandemic, suddenly I was isolated. I couldn't be with my friends. I couldn't play sports, just like what's happened the last 2 years. And so it's like what that did to my mental health. Like what happens to you in an accident like that physically is one thing, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that was the bigger challenge. So for 2 years, I was suicidal. Nobody knew. And then somebody came up to me, said the most amazing thing. He goes, Robb, you're trying to figure out the reason you were hit by a semi truck, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, I know what it is. I'm like, what is it? And he goes, you got hit by a semi truck because you and your friends were going too fast on an icy road. Like, shit happens. What are you going to do with it? And that sounds simple, but that set me free. I was like, okay, I'm not a puppet. I get to make decisions of where my life is going. I'm done being angry. I got a second chance. Maybe I should do something with this, right? So I'm like, I'm done being angry. I remember I screamed at the sky and I was like, I want to do something that matters. Like, I want my life to count, right? And I thought I'd hear a voice inside of me telling me to like move to Africa and build a well, which I would have done. And that's an amazing thing. I didn't hear that. But the first voice that I heard, like not an audible voice, but you know, you get those gut feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I felt this: phone the semi driver that hit you and tell him you're alive. And I was like, what? So I phoned the police. I'm like, hey, can I get the phone number of the semi driver that ran me over? And the cops were like, no. I'm like, oh, I tried. But this voice wouldn't leave me alone. So I kept trying. And finally, I got a hold of this truck driver from the States. And I said, hey, do you remember that car accident up in Canada? And he got real quiet. He was like, yeah. I said, I just felt that I should call you and tell you, like, I'm okay. Like, I'm alive. I survived. And he goes, I'm just so sorry about your friend. He goes, well, I'm like, what friend? He goes, the one that died and lost his skull. I was like, no, that's me. That's why I'm calling. And I could hear it. It set this guy free. But that wasn't the remarkable part of that story. The remarkable part was what happened to me. Because I was like, that felt good. I had never done anything for anyone but me till that day. And I was like, I want that feeling again. Because for 2 years, I was terrified to fall asleep after that accident, because last time I woke up, I had all these injuries and I was in an accident. So what if I fall asleep? What's going to happen? Do I wake up next time? Am I going to, you know, and I'd always have the same nightmare. And my nightmare was watching my own funeral and nobody showed up. Nobody cared that I lived or that I died. So I'm like, I got to do something with this. So I'm like, how could I tell my story? Because there's got to be other people like me that are having those same thoughts and not talking about it. So I'm like, I got to tell my story. I'm like, what's a way to tell a story? Music. So I started a band. I thought I was doing decent, like my writing and stuff like that. And it was okay. I wasn't a great writer. I wasn't a great singer. My worst mark in school was music, actually. I didn't make it into the choir because my voice wasn't good enough, but it wasn't about what I wanted to be, a musician.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was why I wanted to do it is to tell a story. So kept going, got better, and finally got a record deal, had a few top 10 hits on the radio. And that's when you and I met. Mm-hmm. And then, we were getting ready to go to the States for a record deal there and stuff. And I was like, man, like it was fun. We were playing big shows. We're crowd surfing, but I'm like, but I'm not really telling my story. And then I got offered this 9-month tour to go through schools telling my story, just me and my guitar. But it was a 9-month tour with no pay. I was like, I got to do it. And everyone thought it was crazy because I walked away from everything. Me and my guitar, had to refinance my home, owed tons of money because I didn't finish the record deal, right? But I just walked and I just started talking with people and meeting people. And after the 9 months, other schools and other communities started calling, prisons, youth detention centers, reserves, saying, hey, we heard about your effectiveness. Can you come and put a band back together? And started telling these stories. And then, it was just incredible. And one of the most remarkable parts was we had been doing it for a few years, but at our shows, like I tell my story and it was like, hey, I had this accident. So make every day count, because if you never know what tomorrow has for you, right? But I never talked about the fact that I had been suicidal, because I thought, ugh, what would the students think of me? What would the staff think of me if I revealed this weakness, right? But then one day we got called to a school in Ontario and they said, can you come right away? We lost a girl to suicide. And on her suicide note, it revealed that she had a pact with a friend. Like, if you kill yourself, I'll kill myself. They said, can you come right away? We don't know who it is. So we flew out there and got 1,000 students sitting in front of me. And it was an eerie feeling. Somebody sitting in front of me was about to take their life. I don't know where they're sitting. And I could feel my heart starting to beat faster. And I'm like, I got to say it that I was there once too. I was terrified. I'm like, I know somebody in this room is thinking about taking their life. You're not alone. I was there once too. And I braced and it felt like 1,000 pounds off of me. And the relationship between me and the audience went to another level. Between my team, they didn't know I was there once. I kept it a secret, right? And then this girl came up to me after the show, and she hands me a note. I'm like, what's this? She goes, my suicide note. I was going to kill myself this weekend. She's like, I don't need this anymore. And then she walked off with the school counselor to get help. And I was like, wow, like we found her. And I talked with a police officer that, you know, deals with a lot of teen suicides. And I was like, I don't understand. How did she have that note on her? Like, that wasn't freshly written. And the police officer said, yeah, very rarely is the note freshly written. People write it, usually carry it with them for 2 to 3 months before they take their life, waiting for somebody to push them over the edge or for somebody to say something that lets them know they're not alone. So it was like 2 days later, another 1,000 students. I'm like, well, if the stats from Kids Help Phone are true, pre-COVID, 1 in 5 teenagers had seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. So I'm like, another 1,000 students. So I said it again. And it was easier the second time. Somebody here is thinking about it. I was there once too. And a young man came up to me and gave me his note. And he had 917 suicide notes in a 10-year tour. And saw some people have remarkable breakthroughs, you know. It felt fulfilling for the first time.
Well, hey, there's that feeling again that you had when you called that truck driver, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think it's something we all crave. Like, we toured with some of the biggest bands and great experiences, but when you meet them backstage, you think they'd be so fulfilled because they're so successful. They got the big house, but some of them were the most empty people I met. And I think it's because they stopped at success and they never went on to significance. Significance is when your life matters to the world around you. That's what we crave, all of us.
Yeah.
We want to make a difference in the world around us. So, yeah. And then before COVID, the demand was so big, we couldn't go from school to school anymore. So we started bringing 20 schools together, 30 schools together. And our last show before the pandemic was at the arena in Medicine Hat. We walked off stage and it felt like the world ended. And I'm like, this is not going to be fun for people with their mental health. I was there once, isolation. This is not going to be good, you know.
Wow. And then now you've got this new record. And I just want to say, too, that if you asked, and you could, I don't know, but I've heard, too, if you ask how many have thought of suicide, you'd be amazed at how many hands would go up.
Yeah. You know, it just happened at the mall the other day. This girl comes up to me and she goes, oh, you're Rob, like, want a selfie? I'm like, yeah. She goes, your music means so much to me because, you know, I was diagnosed with depression. I have suicidal thoughts. And I looked at her, I'm like, oh, so you're like me. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you hurt deeply, but you love deeply too, don't you? And she was like, yeah. I was like, you hurt deeply, but you can see when others are hurting, can't you? She's like, yeah. I'm like, Now, depression is very real, but isn't it interesting that we don't get diagnosed with empathy? Because there's some beautiful parts about being super emotional. And after talking to 800,000 students, I actually think there's a connection between the arts and mental illness. I'm convinced of it because as artists, we're meant to channel our emotions into a song, into a poem, into a dance, into a painting, you know? And so it's like, channel this, keep going, you know. And when the pandemic hit too, you know, I looked at my team, I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be 2 weeks or 2 months, but I think it's time to start sharing the stories we've collected because I don't think they're going to let 10, 20 schools come together for a show anytime soon. So there was a film crew that had done a little piece on me on CBC a few years ago. Like, they were hired by CBC. Great guys. And I called them during the pandemic. I'm like, hey, can you help us tell some stories? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, I want to follow up with 10 of these kids that gave us suicide notes. Like, find out where are they now? So we started traveling and collecting these stories and just some incredible things. One kid, met him on a reserve in northern Saskatchewan, an Indigenous kid, and you know, he had a couple suicide attempts. And I was like, dude, you got to keep going. Somebody needs your story. Like, are you glad I'm still here? He's like, yeah. I'm like, somebody will say the same thing to you one day. I was like, channel your emotion. Do you like painting, dancing, poetry? Do you write in a diary? Do you like music? He goes, I love music. I'm like, if you could play anything, what would you play? He goes, guitar. He's like, play guitar then. And he goes, he shows me he's a below the elbow amputee. He just has an elbow here. And I was like, don't give me any excuses, play. And you plant a seed with a kid like that, right? And I showed him a video of a kid that plays drums with 2 elbows, and he's great. And last summer he wrote us and he said, thanks for pushing me. Here's a video of me playing Metallica at a song at our school talent show, ripping after playing for 2.5 years with one arm. He has a callus on his elbow that
Yeah.
he uses as a guitar pick, and he plays better than I do in 2.5 years. So he's in this documentary that we shot. It'll be coming out soon, and it's like incredible. And I put together a team of like teachers and psychologists and social workers and counselors, and I said, can you take these episodes of these kids and like let's make some episodes that they can show in schools. So we put together like this living curriculum, and we beta tested it in 4 provinces, and it's out now. But they can watch my story, and then they journal. What was Robb's struggle? What was his breakthrough? How did he get help? And how is he helping other people? Then they watch this kid's story, Dylan. What was his struggle? What was his breakthrough? And after the 4th episode, it's like, what's your struggle? Where could you find a breakthrough? How could you get help? And the teachers are going, we can't believe what they're pointing into these journals. We had so many of these kids, they say 60% of them, they were unaware that they were struggling.
Wow.
Like they were flying under the radar. So it's like, it just feels so good to be spreading hope again, because the last 2 years, it just felt like we're kind of on the sidelines, and so many communities reaching out saying help. And I'm like, why are you calling me? I'm a kid from Kleefeld, Manitoba. Like we just don't know what to do, you know? And yeah, and now we've seen what our governments are willing to do when there's a potential loss of life. And I know there's a lot of parents and grandparents and counselors and uncles and aunts that would say, like, I can tell you another pandemic where we're losing a lot of young people, and it's to suicide, to overdoses and stuff. And, you know, if 1 in 5 kids had a heart condition like that, you'd have a nurse in every hallway. But instead we go to schools where they share one counselor for 8 schools. And what are you supposed to do? Schedule your suicidal thoughts for 3 weeks from now? It doesn't work like that, you know?
Oh my goodness. And through all of this, Rob, I mean, these are fantastic stories, and they really do need to get out of it. But I guess for you, how have you grown personally too? Like, I mean, you still must have, you're never cured. You still must have some dark moments too still. And
Sure.
how do you get out of it?
Well, I think mental health is like physical health. There's days where you feel 100% physically or mentally, and there's days you don't, right? Where you're just like, I'm feeling off today. Now, some people, you know, a low is feeling 80%. If you have mental health issues and depression, stuff like that, you can get down to 5% and lower. So, you know, I lost my dad last spring, and you know, I haven't lost a lot of people close to me, so it was really difficult on me, and I had to start to, you know, really to start taking some of the advice that I had been given to so many people for so long, like, you know, again, trying to just destroy so many of the cliches, because, you know, if I speak at a funeral, and I've done too many during COVID on Zoom because there's 5 people allowed at the funeral, which is a shame, but you know, people often say when you lose somebody, for example, you know, people say like, don't worry, you know, the pain will go away. It's like, no, it won't. And it shouldn't. Like, the pain of losing my dad's not going to go away, because I'm never going to forget him, and it hurts. I miss him, you know. But I've always said, if pain doesn't go away, neither does the strength. If you wake up in the morning looking for pain, you'll find it. If you get up in the morning looking for strength or hope or help, you'll find that too. And sometimes that's a daily decision if you're like me and you've gone to those dark places. But, you know, the antidote to depression isn't happiness. I think it's purpose. Like there's a reason I should keep going. It's because if you've never been to that place where you've thought about taking your life, people often say like, oh, suicide is a selfish act because you take your pain and you give it to the people around you. And granted, that happens. But if you've never been to that place where you're thinking of taking your life, you don't know the voice you're hearing in your head tells you that the most selfless thing you could do is leave. You're a burden to the world around you. Your parents would be better off. Your family, your friends would be better off if you were gone. And that's the lie that through our music, through our presentations, our concerts, that's what we try to dismantle, that lie. Because I had that lie in my head, and I'm glad I stuck around, you know, because my stories helped a few people, even though nobody's ever walked up and said, oh, Rob, I was hit by a semi like you and I have a metal skull. No one's ever said that to me, but they say, this guy's been through something tough. So have I. He's talking about it. Maybe so should I. He
Yeah.
says there's help. Maybe I should go find it, you know, because there are resources out there. But unless you raise your hand and say, like, yeah, I'm one of those that needs it. And that's kind of what I talk about in this new album. You know, I toured so much, I hadn't written a new song in a hot minute. So I started writing, and one of the awards that I got for the work that I do, I was backstage. There was 4 of us getting the award. The other 3 guys were, they're all wearing their army fatigues and they were missing limbs. And I'm backstage going, what am I doing here? I'm like, I'm a musician. I didn't lose a limb in war. You know what? I just felt so unworthy. But then when they introduced me, they said, this next guy is fighting a different kind of a war against an invisible enemy called mental illness. And the artist in me went, oh, I could work with that. You know, like, and I had worked on a song in the past talking about war. And so, yeah, that's the theme of our new album, 18 songs, but the title track, This Is War, kind of calls into question what we've created in the West. Like, we think this is paradise. This is the promised land. Like, this is where everybody wants to live. But is it the promised land we think it is? This is where there's the most suicides, the most overdoses. So what have we really created here? And I kind of challenge that. It's like the beginning of the song, it says, you know, so this is war. Bodies have filled the streets. Blood is beneath my feet. So this is war casting a shadow. Where's the hero? Like, it's time that we unite and fight together, because I think we're losing some of the most gifted people to suicide. I've never been at a funeral or met parents or anybody that says, oh, yeah, it's a good thing our daughter's gone. She had nothing to offer this world. It's always the opposite. She was so gifted. How did she not see it? You know, look at Hollywood again. Linkin Park, Nirvana, Robin Williams, some of the most talented people that, like, they had a struggle to them, you know, gifted people. And when you look at them, like, I'm not here because I feel sorry for you. I'm here because I believe in you. I think you could, I think you could do bigger things than I've ever done. Like that kid Dylan playing guitar with one arm. I think he's going to do bigger things than I've ever done. But when we go back on tour, that guy's going to be on stage with us.
Yes, I was going to say, I mean, you should like at least give him a guitar solo or something. But oh my God, I could talk with you for hours. There's so much here, but kudos to you. You've taken your story, yes, and you've shared your story, but you've taken it all to a new level. So let's hope that others out there not only share their story, but can help the next person. So I think if we kind of do that, then we can do what your big game plan is to really, you know, win this war. So we have This Is War, but we will also have a new song too, correct?
Yeah, the whole album kind of has this war theme, and the song "This Is War" kind of talks about that moment you're on the front lines, you know. And then there's moments in the album where you're in triage, where you're like trying to heal up, and then there's moments you're in victory. And I do a lot of work with the Indigenous and Métis communities, and I was actually, you know, in the beginning when we started doing those shows, there was some tension. It's like, okay, here comes another white boy, you know, like. But once they saw we were genuine, not only were we accepted, we were embraced, and I was given my spirit name. They call me Bear Chief, the protector, and that's why I tattooed the bear on my hand with Chief across the fingers. I was like, you know, they embraced because they could tell it was genuine. And I was sitting down with one of the chiefs and one of the heads of the Métis Federation, and I was like, hey, I want to tell your story, but I've never lived your experience. And they're like, stop that. And I was like, what? Like, look, we don't have a lot of allies, you know, and people are listening to you that wouldn't necessarily listen to us. We're just so thankful that you fight for us and stuff. And I was like, wow, it's like, thank you for being an ally. And I'm like, another ring in my head as an artist. I'm like, ally. So I wrote a song called Ally, and it just talks about a story between two people that, you know, shared that common experience of tragedy and dark thoughts. And they make a vow to, you know, call each other whenever they need, even when they get older and stuff. So in the music video, you'll see them, young playing, basketball together, and they're there for each other. And then they grow older and they have their own jobs. I'm one of them. I'm off on tour, and he's having a struggle, and we always stay in touch, as you hear. And the chorus says, "When the shots fly after midnight, when there's dark skies, I'm your ally. You need to know. Even when stars shine, I'll take a red eye and I'll sit by your bedside." Like, we all need an ally. We're not meant to do this life on our own. We all need an ally. And I think we all want to be an ally to somebody else, because we're not designed to do this alone. And too many people are doing exactly that.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Rob. And we'll show those videos. This is War, an ally. Robb Nash, keep on doing the work that you do. Thank you so much.
I'm glad we're on the same team.
You crossed my heart and I hope you're fine. You better understand you're never far behind. The moment always etched deep inside my mind was the moment we were reading letters back in time. I was there for you, you were there for me. And honesty was something we had never seen. We shared a common thread hanging from a tree. We cut it down together, buried deep beneath. So please, please know, when the shots fly after midnight, when there's dark skies, I'm your ally, you need to know. Even when stars shine, I took a red eye, sit by your bedside, you need to know. When there's no light, you're waiting for sunrise, I can hear your cries, you need to know. You better believe I'm ready to remind, I'm still your ally, you need to know. Please know. You can come over unannounced, just don't ever let me read that you were breaking down alone or building any walls between. Even in December, in the colder winter weather, I just pray that you remember that I'll never let you leave it up to me. And I'll remind you of just who I've seen you be. I was always hiding, but you always saw beneath. Was shaking at the knees, but you wouldn't leave me be. Then we held each other tight and you were everything I need. So please, please know, when the shots fly after midnight, when there's dark skies, I'm your ally, you need to know. Even when stars shine, I took a red eye, sit by your bedside, you need to know. When there's no light, you're waiting for sunrise, I can hear your cries, you need to know. You better believe I'm ready to remind, I'm still your ally, you need to know. Please know, just don't let go. When the shots fly after midnight, when there's dark skies, I'm your ally, you need to know. Even when stars shine, I took a red eye, sit by your bedside, you need to know. When there's no light, you're waiting for sunrise, I can hear your cries, you need to know. You better believe I'm ready to remind, I'm still your ally, you need to know. You need to know. You need to know. You need to know. You need to know.
I want to give a very special thank you to Robb. It was wonderful catching up with him, and stay tuned for more great music. His album will be out shortly. And we wrap it up with, I guess, we'll see you soon. Our next guest will be Katrina here in the hot seat on the Hue Spotlight, and yes, we will have the stools back. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Hue Spotlight.